All right, everybody, welcome back to the Abundance Formula podcast. And today's guest, I am so excited about. I've wanted to have him on for years. And if there's anybody to me who stands for abundance, it is Chris Harder. He is abundantly generous. He's abundantly puts himself out there. He abundantly believes in people. That's one of my favorite things about you, Chris. Like whether you know someone personally or not, like through the internet or whatever, you wholeheartedly communicate and make somebody feel like you believe in their capacity to do whatever it is they feel called to do. And I think that's what sets you apart. So thank you so much for joining us today, Chris.
Oh, literally my pleasure. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, the first question I want to dive into, and somehow maybe I've missed this somewhere on you being on another podcast, but I don't feel like I've heard like the in-depth Chris story. I've heard kind of you and Lori together or whatever, but like I've heard you mention snippets before of like something about maybe getting kicked out of college or I don't know, but I want to know, and I'm sure everyone else does, what is Chris Harder's story and what has kind of led you to where you are today?
Tell you what, I'll kind of give you the cliff notes, and anywhere you want to dive in, we can dive in. So
Yeah.
Midwest, born and raised, and now, of course, split time between California, Arizona, and a lake home back in the Midwest. And, the cool thing about growing up in the Midwest is you're given like really good traits, like fundamental things, family values, grit, work ethic, all those things that turn you into a good human. One of the downsides is, and I understand it's always dangerous to paint with a broad stroke of the brush, but one of the downsides is it doesn't fully facilitate and support like great big dreamers and people that want to go out there and conquer the world, right? And so if you can take those really good fundamental foundational things and then take them to where all the action is, in our case, we ended up taking them out to LA area. That's a perfect 1-2 punch for success. Now the journey, like from where we are today, from where we started, that's had so many ups and downs and just roller coaster loops. It's been crazy. You mentioned it when you were asking the question. I got booted out of college after 2.5 years. And it's because I didn't want to be there. So all I did was party. Hell, the last semester, I didn't even buy books. I didn't buy books. I didn't attend a single class. And at that point, they're just like, don't come back. And it was one of these like really expensive private colleges where they'll take anyone's money and they'll let anybody in. But even that being said, they're like, no, you're not good for us. How about you just don't come back? Now, my parents were devastated because they thought the only route to go was to get a good education, go get a good job. I was excited because I wanted to be out living and participating in the economy already. And I went and I got a job at a car dealership of all places because I loved cars, right? So 21-year-old kicked out of college made sense. And I learned two really important things there. I learned sales and I learned leadership. And if you can learn those two things, then you can write your ticket anywhere in the world, no matter what you want to do. So those first couple of years were really formative in my skill sets. At that time, there was this great big mortgage boom starting to happen. Everyone was getting rich doing mortgages. And of course, I wanted to participate in that. So somewhere around 22, 23 years old, I went and I talked my way into a entry-level loan officer position at what ended up being the world's biggest bank, HSBC. For several years, it was awesome. It was fun. It was a sales atmosphere. I would get a promotion or two every single year. I ended up being one of the fastest rising executives at the world's largest bank. By the time I left there, I had 1,100 employees that were underneath me. It was amazing until it wasn't. When that recession hit in 2008, 2009, everything just shut off like a faucet, including our bonus plans, our compensation plans. The whole environment went from fun and motivational to just totally toxic. And I spent a year flying around. I'd get up every single morning, get on an airplane. I'd fly to some random city like Rapid City, South Dakota, or Des Moines, or anywhere that was within my scope. And I'd walk into a bank branch. I'd say, I'm here to shut you guys down, and I will meet with each one of you one by one to let you know about your severance package and answer any questions you have. That year of doing that was the worst year of my entire life for a lot of reasons. Number one, when you're miserable, you are a miserable spouse. So it made my marriage miserable. Number two, I gained 30 pounds because I'd be on the road doing miserable things. So I'd go back to the hotel room and I would just eat and drink, right? So then I hated my body and how I felt. Number three, when all the bonuses and all the promotions shut off, we ended up being so far underwater, like finance wise, because we were always spending next year's money. We always, listen, I was young and dumb and arrogant and ignorant. I thought it was going to last forever, right? It's bulletproof. And so when the music stopped, we were left holding the bag full of debt and a bunch of things that we shouldn't have even had yet at that point in life. So we had to short sell this great big house that we had just finished building. We had to list all of our furniture and belongings and everything on Craigslist, while car after car pulled up in front of the house, and person after person walked in through my front door, and they would bargain for the chairs, they'd bargain for the table, they'd bargain for the TVs, whatever they wanted, and they would walk out of my house with our possessions and leave me with a little bit of cash in hand. And all of that, was just absolutely miserable. And of course, I ended up, after spending that year flying around, laying everybody off, I ended up taking a severance package and getting laid off as well. And I remember I came home and I told Lori, I'm like, well, Lori's my wife. I'm like, babe, got to let you know, I got laid off today, which we knew was probably coming. And we've been living so far beyond our means that we have to get rid of everything and totally start over. Hence the Craigslist and all of that. And I think the lowest point during that whole episode was when my neighbor across the street, his name was Greg, he had come into the house, kind of let himself in, and I was in the mudroom on my hands and knees packing a box. And I looked up and I'm like, oh, Greg, what are you doing here? And now he's standing over me while I'm on my hands and knees packing this box. And he looks, he's like, hey man, I saw the moving trucks out front. What? I didn't see any for sale sign. What's going on? Where are you going? I said, well, I lost my job and we short sold the home. And that's why I didn't see any, for sale sign. It was just a transaction made with the bank. And we got to go start over in a little 900 square foot, basically mother-in-law suite in a condo building uptown Minneapolis. And he looked at me and he goes, man, what would you go and do that for? You're going to ruin all the other values in the neighborhood. And I thought, what a great, rock bottom moment while this guy stands over me and has the most callous, uncaring, response ever to somebody who's starting their life over. What a great moment to realize, this is not where I wanted to be anyways. And so Lori and I took that moment. We took the loss of everything. We took that time out that was handed to us. And we decided we get to choose again. We decided we get to decide how we want to show up in the world. How do we want to add value? What do we really want to be doing? Because even though things were fun for a while, I didn't choose that route. I just got stuck on that route and it was going so well, I couldn't get off. And the ability to choose again when your back is against the wall is one of the greatest gifts you'll ever be given, because we wouldn't be the individuals with the companies and everything that we've accomplished today, from then until now. We wouldn't be those individuals without that horrible rock bottom moment. So to anyone who's listening right now, I would say this: if you're there, or if you think you're coming up on being there, I'm not going to convince you that it feels good. It felt miserable having people walk through your front door, from Craigslist. It felt miserable having your neighbor stand over you and say, what would you do that for? You're going to ruin the values of the neighborhood. It felt miserable telling my wife, hey, babe, we're losing everything, got to start over again. All of those things were miserable. I'm not going to tell you they feel good, but I'm going to tell you, you'll look back on that moment where you're stripped of everything, so you get to paint whatever you want on that new blank canvas. You're going to look back on that moment, and it's going to be one of the top, best freaking moments of your life. I can promise you that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I don't love that you went through the experience. However, I'm glad that you overcame the experience so that you can be sharing with people that they too can do this. And this ties perfectly into something that I wanted to ask you, because I feel like you guys are naturally good at this, but also didn't know you guys before now, obviously. But I heard, and you may have listened to this interview with Ed Mallett and Matthew McConaughey. I don't know if you heard that one yet. I know you know him, but yeah. It made me think of this because I wanted to ask you this question after I heard their interview. So Matthew McConaughey was telling this story about before he had his big breakthrough, and He only had like $800. He was sleeping on some producer's couch or something. And he's like, you got to get me with an agent because then I can take off. And the guy told him, I'm not getting you with an agent or putting you in front of him until you stop needing it so bad, because they'll smell the need and you're never going to get it and you'll be done in this industry. He said, in fact, what you need to do is you need to take your $800, you need to go away and leave the industry and come back when you don't need it so bad.
Yeah.
And so then he did, and he took his $800 and he got on a motorcycle with his friends and he drove around Europe for a week, and he came back. And, of course, then they move on to the story of the guy could tell he didn't even ask about it. He just moved on with his life. And the guy's like, all right, you're ready. And he had an interview set up. He got this agent, and then his breakthrough came. But what I wanted to know was what I feel like a lot of people skip. So I want to ask you this about your personal, life and just in general. What happened in that week? You know what I mean? Inside and spiritually, how do people, like where you were, you need the next job, you need the next gig, or you need the next thing. You do literally need it. Yeah. But there's this moment spiritually and inside, whatever someone believes, that has to happen to release that need so you actually can receive. Can you tell us about, for you, that experience for you?
My parallel to that would be this. I released the need to have a certain title. I released the need to have certain things. I released the need to be seen in a certain way because I was stripped of all of that. So my choice was sit there and be absolutely devastated that I don't have those things and try and figure out how do I get them back quickly, or use that time to choose how I really want to show up in the world, how I really want to add value in the world. And, in Matthew's story, how it's a week and he goes and has this soul searching motorcycle ride with his buddies and they crash one and all those things that happen. I wish it was a week. It was a few years. See, the truth of the matter is when your back is against the wall, you still need certain things. Like you need a place to live. You need food on the table. You need opportunity. You need these things so you can, one, survive, two, figure out your plan of what your comeback is going to be. And I remember when I told Lori, I said, babe, bad news, lost my job today, going to lose everything, got to start over. I didn't know how she was going to respond. It could have been anything and it would have been justified. But she was quiet. She was abnormally quiet for a while and didn't say anything. And finally, the first words out of her mouth were, I'm never going to let this happen again. And that is what sprung her into action to become the Lori Harder that everybody knows today. That is when she started personal training. That's when she started competing in fitness. That's when she got the 11 covers of fitness magazines. That is when she started her online workout program before anybody was doing it. That is when she opened her first gym. That is what sprung her into action, because we needed her to step up to the plate and go put food on the table. We needed her to step up to the plate and figure out how she's going to participate economically, because she didn't have to before. That need is actually a great fuel. Need can be good and need can be bad, just like anything. It depends how you direct it. So if you need to overcome a challenge that's in front of you, that can be great fuel because you do things you wouldn't normally do when you're comfortable. Mm-hmm. But if you need shallow things, you need affirmation from other people, you need a certain a shine or luster, you need a certain reputation. If you need those things, it can be very dangerous. So need can be good and need can be bad. We used need to spring into action, to create this monster in a good way, Lori, out of somebody who always had that potential but never needed to act on it before. So need can be a very powerful thing if you channel it in the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a powerful, mindset shift to make, because I think people, like you said, can just sit in the need and function from lack, as opposed to say, okay, I'm going to use this need as fuel and as fire, as opposed to just, be defeated by it. And it's ultimately a choice. And I love, even in your story of you telling that guy stand over you, even so many people wouldn't have been honest about actually what was going on. And just made a story. But I think a huge thing for people to note from that story is you are very much real about with yourself as to where you were, instead of trying to even be gentle on yourself to this is why I'm here. And it's because of so-and-so, and it's because of this, and it's because of that. It's okay, this is just what it is. Yeah. So now let's move forward. So I think that's
Yeah.
really huge that you guys both did, and just the honesty level with yourself. Because if you're lying to yourself, then you also won't go find truth and live your next level truth either.
You're so spot on. If you're lying to yourself, you're never going to feel that pain point enough in order to make you go do the scary or uncomfortable things that it takes to get to that ultimate place where you really want to be. The truth is, most people, they kind of tread water through life. They kind of coast through life. They kind of react to everything that happens in their life. And I'm not saying this is, they're good or bad people, but I am telling you factually where most people operate. And they operate in a very reactionary, mediocre state. And some people are probably getting triggered by me saying that right now.
Mm-hmm.
You don't understand what's happened to me. You don't understand the challenges that I have. You don't understand my unique situation. Everybody has a unique situation. Everybody has different, but same level of challenges at some point. Everybody has strengths and everybody has weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's on a pretty equal playing field. And when you are honest with yourself and then decide to be honest with everybody else, that's the moment where you're not hiding behind mediocrity anymore. You're not hiding behind, a false story anymore. That's the moment that, because you make an honest assessment of where you're at to yourself and to the world, you now realize that you've got to start showing up. It's one of the most freeing things that you can actually ever do. But it's tough for humans to do. It really is. We don't want to admit where we're at. We just want to wake up and medicate our way through the day so that we can have hopes of having a mediocre day instead of a bad one.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what keeps people trapped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, and so one thing I also note about you is, and obviously you have a podcast, you ask really great questions. And I know everybody, you guys always talk about when you ask better questions, you get better answers. And these are the kinds of things that create your breakthroughs. I was curious if you could share with everybody, especially about financial abundance, because that's one thing I'm excited about having you on, because you're such a proponent of, like you said, growing up in this place where you kind of get trained that like wanting abundant finances is greedy or it's a bad thing, as opposed to what I personally believe is that, that desire can be divine as well. And that you're given this extraordinary desire to want more because God intended you to have more. So that was in you. And it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means you're supposed to, as you say, when great people, make great money, they do great things. So what has the evolution of your questions looked like, say in the beginning, as you started to break through each new glass ceiling, like the starting over base Chris Harder, what kind of questions were you asking people to figure out how to get back on your feet? And then maybe you started doing well and then you needed to break through that next. So what did the evolution kind of some of these questions you started asking that were helpful questions that got you places?
This is such a good question, because Lori and I actually have real questions that we ask ourselves out loud that we kind of pull out of the vault when we need them. And when we were starting over, the first question that we asked ourselves, and we had never asked ourselves this question before, is how do we get bigger than the problem? And that has now been a question that we pull out of the vault all the time, because you always have problems. I don't care where you're at. You always have some kind of challenge in front of you. Instead of pulling back, cutting back, hiding from the problem, ask yourself, how do I get bigger than this problem? So if you've got a financial hurdle in front of you, it can feel insurmountable. I get that. But instead of saying, how do I cut back here and how do I cut back there to maybe one day break even, ask yourself, how do I grow? Where do I grow to get bigger than this problem? Because when your default becomes getting bigger than the problem instead of cutting back or running, that's a whole different set of muscles that you build. That's a whole different way of living that you start to use as your default. And now you've created a situation where no matter what's in front of you, your automatic response is, that's all right. How do I get bigger than this problem too? So that's the first question that we start asking ourselves. The second one that we start asking ourselves is, who do we need? Now, Lori was reinventing in this moment. I was reinventing in this moment. And surprisingly, it was a lot less about what do we need to know or what do we need to do. Those things are important. But the most important question was actually, who do we need? So let's go back to that story where everybody was coming through my front door, taking my stuff and leaving me a little bit of cash from Craigslist. The cash that I had in hand from weeks on end of doing that, selling that stuff, it amounted to just enough for us to go move in to a tiny little loft slash, well, it doesn't even qualify for an apartment. It was somebody's mother-in-law suite. In other words, it was in one of the wealthiest buildings in uptown Minneapolis. Now, here's where people are like, what are you talking about? You just lost everything. What are you doing moving into a building like that? This is who do we need? Follow me. We knew the who that we needed were other people that had the right idea about how to become wealthy, the right idea about how to grow businesses, the right idea and the right connections as to how to get there faster. So going and living among people who have not been there, done that yet was not going to be a solution. Those are the wrong who's to surround yourself with. We knew we needed to be surrounded by people who've already been there, done that to teach us the right way this time. Because our whole lives, we took advice from people that either didn't know what they were talking about or loved us dearly, but weren't qualified to give us that advice. And unfortunately, that's the advice that most people are operating on. They listen to the wrong who, their teachers, their parents, their neighbors, their friends who are no further along than them. Those are all the wrong who's. So we said, who do we need? We need people who've already been there, done that. So we took all that money from selling everything. Remember, we're broker than broke. But we took all that money and we prepaid 1 year's lease in this extra mother-in-law suite on the first floor of this great big high rise where everybody, the rest of the people in that building were rich as hell. And it was somebody was just renting out this mother-in-law suite because they never used it. And we prepaid that 1 year, and that 1 year of being in that building allowed us the runway and the peace of mind, right? Because now we didn't have to make rent payments for a year, to figure out how do we want to get bigger than the problem? What do those actions look like? What are those new thought patterns? And who can help us get there? The who was we needed to be surrounded by the people who have already been there, done that. So those two questions will change your life. How do I get bigger than the problem? And who do I need to get where I'm going? The what's easy. You can Google the what. The what is commoditized. The what is a dime a dozen. It's available out there for free. The who is the difficult part. It's difficult, one, to figure that out. Who is it? Two, to find out where those who's are. And three, to find a way to break in to the circle of who's that will make your life grow that much faster, that much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's awesome. Which that was one of my next questions. Is obviously you've broke into the who's now, but so how do people do that? So you can kind of say find where they're at. Now here you are with no thought leadership to your name at this point amongst all these who's. How did you now break into creating these friendships or to be able to start asking these questions and gleaning and learning these things from these people who are however far ahead of you? How can you recommend to people to navigate that world?
Sometimes it takes radical moves that most people won't consider, like the one where we sold everything and then took all that money. What would other people do? They'd try and pay off debt, or they'd try and put the money somewhere their parents told them to put. Nope, we're just going to put this down on 1 year's rent and be in the building where the movers and shakers are. So sometimes it's something radical like that. But I understand not everybody is going to do something that radical. Sometimes it's a whole bunch of small actions to put yourself among the who's that have the shortcuts and the ideas that you need in order to get where you want to go. That could be asking yourself, where do people who are already at where I want to go, where do they hang out? And start hanging out in those places. Where do they gather? Where do they learn? What do they do in their spare time? Start going to those places. Here's a great example. Lori and I went to a Tony Robbins Unleash Your Power Within event during this time. Like, all right, we need to start diving into self-development. We need to fortify ourselves, make us better, lean, mean, income-producing machines if we're going to get out of this situation. So we went to Tony Robbins Unleash Your Power Within. Now remember, we're starting over financially. So we should have bought the tickets in the back of the room that were, I don't know what they were back then, $500, right? Instead, we bought the front row VIP, probably $2,500 a ticket, I'm guessing. Tickets that if you talk to a financial advisor, they'd say, you shouldn't spend that money on that right now. So why did we get those front of the row tickets? It's because in those front rows, in that VIP section, were all of the other business people, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, individuals that we wanted to meet, that we wanted to share ideas with, that we wanted to mix it up with in order to accelerate our journey. So sure enough, in those 3-4 days of being at UPW, we met people who taught us digital marketing. We met people who gave us ideas on how Lori could grow our online business or fitness plan. We met people who just supported us and made us think bigger. We met so many people in those 4 days who were already several steps ahead of where we were at but wanted to go. That $2,500 per ticket investment, when somebody would have said, buy the $600 tickets in the back of the room, it's one of the best investments we've ever made. So then we continued to do that. We would invest. Here's another one. After we had some momentum, and I always want to be careful that I don't leave people behind in the journey, that they don't get lost in the numbers. So we started by doing things like going to Tony Robbins UPW. Your version of that, and I don't mean you, I mean you, the listener, might be, whose event can you go to and maybe just get those VIP tickets and go network with. But now that led to a little bit of success. That little bit of success led to a little bit of money. That little bit of money led to the opportunity, as Lori was building momentum in her career, to go to a Jack Canfield Train the Trainer for 3 weeks. And I remember when she came to me, she's like, Chris, I want to have an event. And it ended up being this incredible event, one of the first women's events ever out there, called Bliss Project, that went on for 7 years. It's huge. She goes, I want to have an event, and I want to write a book, and I want to do all these things. And I know I need to go get into this room to learn from Jack and the other people in this room how to do all of that. And it was $25,000. Now remember, I don't want to leave anyone behind. So if you're listening, this was after we built a little bit of momentum. First, we were buying, the Tony Robbins tickets and things like that. So this is step 2 or 3. And when she told me the price, I mean, I about had all the oxygen, pushed out of my lungs. But I saw how convicted she was about this. So I said, all right, babe, we'll find a way. So she bought into that 3-week Train the Trainer with Jack Canfield. Intimate group, I think it was 60 people. Some of the people who we are still friends with today, some of the people who we still do business with today. And this was years and years and years ago. That 3 weeks reshaped the way she thought unlike anything else. That 3 weeks gave her ideas that we would have never had on our own. That 3 weeks gave her shortcuts. That 3 weeks gave her inspiration. That 3 weeks, honestly, just put her in a room full of people where she got to look around and say, man, if these people are doing it, why can't I? So it made it real for her. That's the importance of getting around people who are already doing what you want to be doing, is when you are around them on a regular basis or in an intimate setting, it makes it real for you. You realize, wait, they're not magical. They don't have superpowers. They're just like me, but they're doing a few things different. That $25,000 for a 3-week investment was one of the best investments we ever made. It was scary. It was uncomfortable. We had never done it before, but it's one that still pays dividends today in a big, big way. So all of this to say, when you said, how do we go find the who's? Ask yourself, where are they at? And how can you get in that room? Start small, then work your way up until you're getting into the biggest rooms by the biggest people.
Yeah, I love it. And for you, so I know Lori had started getting some ideas. I think a lot of people get so stuck on, okay, so we're starting over. I don't know exactly what I want to do or which of my gifts to use or which skill sets I should even be presenting to these people. For those people, do they just need to just dive in, just run with one of them and just see where it takes you, and ask the questions, or what? I know you obviously coach people in that. What do you coach people on so they don't get stuck there and just not move any direction?
Action speeds up feedback. Feedback is the answers to the test. Where everyone gets stalled, and I love that you asked the question this way. Everyone gets stalled because they're doing exactly what you said. Well, I don't know what I would lead with yet. I don't know what I'd talk about yet. I don't know what my business would be yet. They're yetting themselves to freaking death. You actually won't get the answers to those questions until you start taking some messy action in just any of those directions. That messy action will give you feedback. Hey, this feels good, or hey, I'm really bad at this. That feedback becomes the answers to the test. hey, I'm not going that way again, or gosh, I should go this way, not this way. That is the answer to everything that you guys are looking for. The answers are on the other side of you taking messy action that's going to feel like crap. It's going to be uncomfortable. People are going to tell you you're stupid for doing it, or it's another one of those things, or whatever it is. But on the other side of that is that feedback, and that feedback is the answers to the test that you're looking for. You will never, ever, ever, ever know what your true calling is. You will never know how to get there. You will never know if it's the right direction or the wrong direction or the right idea or the wrong idea until you start going passionately in that direction. And you're going to get the feedback that, yep, this is going well. I was meant to go here. Or you're going to get feedback that, nope, this is definitely not for me. Looks like I'm supposed to go the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
That's the value of the action, is the feedback.
Right. Yeah. I think people always get so like deterred to think, oh, well, if I went down the wrong path, I've wasted all this time. It's like it's never really even the wrong path. It's all those learning lessons that are part of the right path. It's strengthening where you're supposed to go. It's gave you some new skill set that you're going to ultimately need in some other way that maybe you didn't anticipate, or it's just the emotion muscles you're getting worked, or whatever it may be. It's never a waste unless you've decided that it is. So I think that's huge for people. Just be moving. The car is easier to steer when it's moving. It's obviously doesn't do you any good to turn left and right if you're sitting still. So I love that. And that kind of leads into this question I wanted to ask you. It's kind of a hard one to figure out, or to keep it a short-winded question. But so in all this striving to live an extraordinary life, because obviously anyone listening to this, they're looking for the abundance formula. They're looking for abundance, not just, like you said, the mediocre life. So in all the striving, as I'm sure you've experienced too, it's easy to get caught up in all the striving and all the action taking and putting too much weight on like this action is the one that's going to cause the breakthrough. This one's going to do it. When really, I'm curious, for any of the breakthrough moments you can think of in your life that really took you to the next level, was it more so the actual action that happened that was, say, quote, triggered the breakthrough? Or do you believe that it's more so not only the compilation of these small, mundane things that really don't seem important at the time, and also just it's time? Like, I know I've heard you talk before, like for you believe that, God, it's God's timing. Say, I believe the same. Like when it's when it's time, you can try for the sale over and over and do all the right things. But if it's not supposed to be yet, then it won't. So can people find peace in their journey in striving for abundance, especially financial abundance, to ultimately know like the thing that's really triggers the breakthrough is this orchestration that's really all behind the scenes and a compilation of these small mundane things and it just being meant to be? I'm just curious about that, for you.
I hear your question loud and clear, and maybe this surprising truth will free some people up. I've never had a breakthrough moment. Lori's never had a breakthrough moment. There's never been the thing that finally happened and it all fell into place. There's never been the person that we finally met and it all fell into place. There's never been the endorsement that happened and it all fell into place. There's never been a breakthrough moment, ever, 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 ever. Everything that we have, everything that we've accomplished has simply been the compounding sum of all the little actions, the wrong ones that gave us feedback, the right ones that said, yep, go more in that direction, the trials, the errors, the small wins that stack over time, the micro failures that people think would be a great big catastrophic failure, but it's really not. There's never been a breakthrough anything. And there won't be for you, the listener. What there is the compounding effect of you taking your first step into your second step. And then because you're a step further than you were before, you know a little bit more. So now that next step becomes just a little bit easier. So instead of taking step from, your second step to your third, you actually get to step from your second step to your fourth, right? That's compounding. Mm-hmm. Now that you're 4 steps along the path, you know a little bit more. You've got a little bit more feedback. You're a little bit more armed and dangerous. So now you're not making step from 4 to 5. You're stepping from 4 to 8, right? See the compounding? Mm-hmm. Now you're on step 8. Now you got a lot more feedback and you got a lot more, wisdom about you and a lot more momentum and a few more relationships. So you're not taking that step from 8 to 9. You're taking that step from 8 to 16. So look what happens. You go from 1 to 2, not very big, but 2 to 4, still not that big. 4 to 8, a little bigger. 8 to 16, okay, we're making some progress here. 16 to 32, 32 to 64, 64 to 128, 128 to 256, 256 to 512, and all of a sudden you're at step 1024. And it did not take you 1024 steps to get there. It just took the compounding effect of you being willing to take the next step that allowed you to get that little bit more knowledge, a little bit more momentum, a little bit more money to invest, a little bit, few more relationships that then made your next step worth 4 steps or worth 8 steps or worth 16 steps. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, you phrased that perfectly. And I'm glad people could hear that, because I think, like you're saying, yeah, again, the other thing that holds people up besides, oh, well, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do yet, is like they're waiting for this breakthrough moment when, like you're saying, it may feel like a quote breakthrough moment when you've gotten to where, like you said, you can go from 8 to 16, oh, quote breakthrough. But really, when you've put the do in and you've put the action in the small little quote mundane things, you're like, oh, that's why this feels like a breakthrough. It's not because some big thing that changed everything. This one podcast I did, it changed all my course of direction. It's like, no, it was the learning of all the small, simple things, the free things you did, the person that you were kind to that you didn't see any relational value, but it meant everything. And they turned into be somebody you didn't know what they were. Like, those are the things that ultimately teach you the stuff that gets you from 8 to 16 to the thousands. And it goes faster. And your concept, I think it's important people to know, like, everybody's a beginner at some point. And so you'll learn as you continue along this journey to release this concept of time, because I think, as we're taught, it takes a long time to earn these things. Yeah. Well, with that mindset, it does. But when you get this mindset like you just talked about and you just get going, now all of a sudden time is irrelevant, because now you can, the knowledge skips a lot of those steps. And so you just got to get going and don't think too far ahead. Don't focus on the big things you need to do. Just focus on the small things, and it will really cascade and snowball, like you're saying. So it's a great analogy that you pictured for people that I think will really, really help people see when they're looking at people like you or looking at other people, to think it wasn't because they, like, I always love, like, Joanna Gaines' story of, like, they got found from Fixer Upper because of this one blog that she wrote. Well, that blog, she didn't sit down and write and think, this is going to be my best blog yet. I'm going to put it up. It's going to trend. And then this producer's going to see it. Like, they weren't even trying to be on TV. She just sat down yet another day and wrote yet another blog and posted a normal blog that wasn't crazy popular or trending. And the right person saw it at the right time and saw something in it. She didn't sit down to try to make anybody see anything or to force anything. She just showed up yet again. And it's the same thing in your life and in everybody else's life, that you just have to do it and do the little things. Don't put so much weight on every single step. Just get taking steps. So I love that.
Example ever. You're so good at adding in really good examples because they're totally relevant. That was probably her 1000th blog or whatever that she wrote. Nothing special, but she was willing to take all of those steps until that step led to an exponential step. It wasn't a breakthrough moment. Mm-hmm. It was the culmination, the compounding effect of all the small moments added up into one, and one person tripped across that blog. You got to do the work. It's going to take longer than you expect. You can sit around and cry about that, or you can just take the first step. But, there's a saying out there: people will overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 5. It's so true. Take that first step, not for what it's going to get you tomorrow, but for where it'll lead to 5 years from now. Because I promise that spot feels really, really good.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, I want everyone to know about your latest venture that you're doing. And I would love if you can tell them kind of the story behind that.
Yeah,
because I love it.
This means the absolute world to me. Mm-hmm. I'll tell this story all day long because it came from a random act of generosity. My entire brand is the common thread of generosity and people's success stories, right? Well, who would have thought that it actually came all the way around full circle to land in my lap and end up doing what I'm doing now. So when you've got a brand that is centered around generosity and money and business, it invites a lot of DMs where people slide in your DMs and say, hey, here's my hardship. Could I have some money? Here's my hardship. Could I borrow some money? And I got so many of them, like probably 100 a month, not kidding, that I had to make a personal policy not to give money in the DMs. You don't know what's true, what's not. How do I pick one person's hardship over another? And I certainly can't fund the world's hardships. So I decided I'm not going to give money in the DMs. I'm only going to give money in verifiable ways where I see where it's going. I know where it's going. That being said, despite having that personal policy, a little over 3 years ago, I'm sitting there scrolling Instagram, trying to kind of look through the DMs, and I get a physical feeling. And I don't know how else to describe it. So do with this what you want. It was like a message from God that came through my head into my heart. Again, do with that what you may. But it's a physical feeling that said, hey, open this one and answer it. So I did. And it was a landscaper. He said, hey, Chris, I listened to the show. Thanks for all that you put out there. I'm a landscaper, and I'm really embarrassed to send this to you. But I'm 2 payments behind on my truck, man. And if I don't find $680 in a few days, they're going to repossess my truck. And if they repossess my truck, yeah, I'll lose my business. But what's worse is I've got 2 guys that work for me, and they're going to lose their jobs. Is there any way that you would lend me $680? So just following this feeling, I was like, hey, stranger, I'm not going to lend you $680, but I will give you the $680. I'll send it to you over PayPal. And all I ask in return is that you put yourself in position to do this for somebody else down the road one day. I believe in you. That was it. Thought I would never hear from this dude again. Was it a scam? Was it real? Was it not? I didn't care. I followed feeling. So I PayPal him the $680. Think I'll never hear from him again. And a couple months later, I get an unsolicited DM back from him. So I see the DM. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. I started a slippery slope. I open it, and he says, hey, just wanted to give you an update. I just want to let you know what you did for me that day when you sent me that money. So I took the money, and of course I got current on the truck, and those 2 guys kept their jobs, and that's great. But something else happened. When you told me to put myself in position to do this for somebody else one day, and that you believed in me, he goes, I don't know why, but that just lit a fire in me, and I've gone out getting as many new landscape accounts as I possibly can, to the point where I am now buying a second truck and hiring 2 more guys, and I just wanted you to know this, and I just wanted to say thank you. And I thought, holy crap, $680 measly dollars. And I don't mean to diminish $680 to people who, where money's tight right now, but in the grand scheme of things, this is not a lot of money for a life-changing trajectory like that. $680 was all it took to keep this guy from losing his job and 2 other guys losing their jobs, to this guy catching fire and adding 2 additional jobs to the economy. $680, that's it. So this became the seed planted in me where I was like, I've got to solve this problem. How do I matchmake guys who are in this type of trouble, who have an urgent financial need, who good people, they're just in a temporary jam? How do I matchmake them with individuals like myself? And how would I ever incentivize individuals like myself to lend them money? That became the 2-sided marketplace called Frello, a friendlier loan, where we're literally doing that. We're building this app that matchmakes people that need a quick financial injection, personal loans under $2,500, matchmaking those with people like you and I that would say, hey, I'll give you your $500. You can pay me back 604 weeks. And somebody else goes on and they say, hey, I'll give you your $500. You've just got to pay me back 550, but I need it in a week. So all these blind bids start coming in, and the borrower gets to choose what's best for them. Maybe it is the 1-week solution and the lowest cost of funds. Maybe it's a 12-week solution because they need some time to be able to make small payments. They choose what's best for them. When they choose that lender, when they choose that person, we lock that contract in the air, we move the money over to them, and we move the payments back in reverse. And it's a win-win for everybody. The lenders, those individuals, get to make a little bit of money that they wouldn't make before. And the borrowers, we're saving them from walking into these predatory payday loan stores where $1,000 turns into $3,500 of debt overnight. This is one of the best win-wins on the planet. It's Uber, but for personal loans.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's such a great idea. And I love that there's this amazing story behind it with the transfer. So like I said, even before we started this, that you're one of those people that's one of your superpowers, is this ability to communicate even just through a computer screen or a phone or whatever. This belief in someone, that's something I'm super passionate about, is so many people, we don't have to have it, but man, if you just feel that someone truly wholeheartedly believes in your capacity for whatever, it can just really make people become the next Thomas Edison or whatever. It's like
Absolutely.
don't let those people fall. I don't want those people to give up on their dream before, like, they just need a spark. And so I love people like you that are spark makers, that traject the next game changers of this world to go do their thing, that if they didn't get that one little just belief spark, they might not have done it. They might have just given up or whatever. And so I love that that's the story, that's the fuel behind this. And I also love, because I had listened to the episode where you explained more about the app, because I wanted to know more about it and like the details of it. And I love how you said, like, so now you felt like this particular project was going to be, you felt like it'd be more your your legacy project.
Yeah.
And what I loved, and I want people to hear this, is that this thing that now you have, felt from a soul hit was now became your legacy project, was something that you actually had no idea how to create. It didn't utilize all these strengths and all this history you now have, all the past thought leadership. It took you into somewhere that, okay, God, you want me to now go do my legacy project, which has nothing to do with my past experience. How do what do I do? And so again, that's where people might just want to give up and be like, well, that's outside my wheelhouse. I have no clue how to build an app, and then to how to do all of the legal things and how to blah, blah, blah. But instead, you've used all these skill sets that you've built. Okay, who do I need? And I love the story about, like, and you can even tell people really quick about, like, who you needed. And he had a team already ready. And that was such a really cool, again, just perfect orchestration of everything falling into place. That, again, if you hadn't just taken the messy step of what's next, you didn't know all that was happening behind the scenes. Tell them a little bit about that so they know what I'm talking about.
Couldn't be more spot on. I mean, listen, here's the great irony. I am not tech savvy. Like, if something goes wrong with my TV, my brother has to come over and fix it. I don't like tech. I've never been interested in tech. I've never wanted an app. That I've never in my life said, oh God, I'd love to be the founder of a big app sometime, Uber or something. Never wanted it. That being said, this mission meant so much to me. Back to those questions, when you said, hey, what are some questions that you've asked yourself in life that work? How do I get bigger than this problem, right? So in other words, how do I accomplish this mission? And who do I need to do it? Well, that who, this is part of the miracle, man. Mm-hmm. That who is Matt, my 50-50 business partner. And Matt had been a friend of mine for several years. I met him, ironically, at a mastermind years ago, and just cultivated a friendship. Never thought we'd ever do any kind of business together. And Matt had grown and built and sold a massive 9-figure tech company on his own. And when he sold that company in 2021, he sold it to a competitor. And the competitor said, hey, man, I want your customers. I want your tech. I want your IP. I want all that, but I don't want your team because I already got one. So Matt, when he received this great big 9-figure exit by selling the company, he went to his team and he said, hey, guys, this is not the end of the road. I'm so grateful that you got us across the finish line that I'm going to commit to paying your salaries, even though they don't want you. I'm going to commit to paying your salaries for 2 years. And I don't care if you want to sit on the couch and coast, great, you've earned it. Or if you want to go get a job and double dip, no problem, you've earned it. Or who knows, maybe someone will come along one day and bring us a project and we can get the band back together because we know that we're really good working together. Right about that time, that's when I come. I'm like, Matt, you got to help me with this thing, man. Here's the vision. I painted the vision for him. He's like, this is insane. This will work. But you have to sell my team on it. And if my team wants to do it, I'm in. So I pitched his team, and they loved the altruistic side of it, right? The doing good for people that creates good in return for those who did good for them. It's the way it's literally supposed to operate in life. So they loved the altruistic side of it. And so I've been off to the races with this thing. Said, Matt, take half the company, let's go. We've been off to the races because we already had the entire team that's needed to build the app and do the marketing and take care of the legal and do all of these things because they've already been there, done that. And that entire situation, that came from asking the question, all right, who do I need to do this if this is not in my wheelhouse? So I'm telling you, those two questions, how do I get bigger than the problem and who do I need? Mm-hmm. It'll give you everything that you need in life. No more excuses if you start asking yourself those questions.
Mm-hmm. And just getting good at those faith leaps, like, because that's what's also launched you into each next new thing, was just you're not going to have all the answers, and you just got to take a faith leap and another faith leap, and it might be small, and then it might be huge, and it might be, it started out as little things, but then it turned into the big, Jack Canfield thing, and then it turns, it's so it's a muscle in itself that gets stronger as you use it and as you go through it. But then it's amazing what, peace you can feel despite making a radical decision when you get better at that faith leap, soul hit listening muscle. So I love it. I think that's so great. Tell everybody where they can find you, follow you, be involved, reach out if they want to be, in support of this app. Tell them about all that.
Yeah, there's a few great places. So, DM me on Instagram, Chris W. Harder. I love answering your business questions. But the second place is the Chris Harder Show. I put out 3 episodes a week on a podcast just like this. I think my favorite place to find me is I text thousands and thousands and thousands of people every single morning that I wake up. Well, Monday through Friday, but every single morning that I wake up, a positive money mantra or positive business perspective, so that you can see the day through an abundant set of lenses before your feet hit the floor. And it's totally free. There's no catch. So if you want me to text you, if you want me to add you to the list, just text me the word daily, so I know to put you on the list. Text me the word daily to 310-421-0416. Again, that's text me the word daily to 310-421-0416, and I'll throw you on the list and text you every morning I wake up.
Awesome. I'll have all that in the show notes as well, so it's easy for everyone to see. So the final question I love asking everybody and seeing just what every person says is, what does living an abundant life mean to you? And if someone were to ask you how they could start to build an abundant life for themselves, what would you tell them?
Here's what it means. It means choice. Choice is the best thing money can buy. People would say, no, it's not. Health is. No, you get good health by having choice. You get to choose the organic, expensive, healthy foods instead of the inexpensive, bad for you foods. You get to choose better health care. I mean, here's an example. 2 days ago, I had this full body executive physical done where they did CT scans and MRIs and everything, every organ, every piece of my body, and created modeling that we walked through to make sure there's nothing lurking there. That's $15,000. Insurance doesn't cover that. That's real choice. That's how you buy health, with real choice. The choice to work when you want, with who you want, the choice to be with your family when you want to be with your family, the choice that if you want to bring your parents out to live by you, or if you want to bring your siblings out by you, you have those choices. Choice is the best thing that abundance can buy. Choice is abundance. And so, the first answer to your question is choice. The second answer of how do you get there? I'm going to be blunt. You accept the fact that you've probably been influenced by all the wrong people. And I don't mean they're bad people. I mean, they're probably great human beings, loving human beings, maybe even human beings that care about you more than anyone else, but they weren't qualified to give you advice on how to live an abundant life because they hadn't figured it out yet themselves. So if you want to live an abundant life, you have to start adding new people to your circle, not replacing. You're not abandoning other people, but you are adding new people to your circle that will change the way you think about money, change the beliefs and thought patterns you have around it, change the knowledge you have around finances, and actually equip you to wake up every day and know that you're making the right decisions with the right thought patterns in order to get to that life of abundance and choice.
I love that. Awesome. Pause our recording here real quick.